right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out. Seeing some familiar faces in the audience, but is it anyone's first InnoHive event? Okay, welcome. Welcome so much. Okay, a lot of people. So especially welcome to everyone who's joining us for your first time. As Wanda said, my name is Mary. I do not work at InnoHive. I'm an InnoHive community member like all of you. And I just also started joining InnoHive panels and networking events recently, and I found that InnoHive is trying to create this really inclusive and opening and welcoming community for people in Tokyo who are looking to help each other grow in our careers, whether that be technology, robotics. We're going to talk a lot about entrepreneurship today, or space, and all of these different related careers, and to innovate together. So every month or so, they hold these panel talk series, and today we're going to be discussing women in tech and business, which is an issue that's very close to my heart, to our panelists' hearts, and I assume to all of you because you have joined us today. So we're really looking forward to having this discussion, and we're hoping to make it engaging. So in a moment, we're going to introduce ourselves, and we're going to have a discussion, and of course at the end there will be time for Q&A, but while we're discussing, I think all of you have a lot to share as well. So if you have any questions or any comments as we're discussing, please feel free to jump in. And I think, when do we have until for this? Okay, please poke me or flag me down. Okay. But without further ado, I guess maybe what we can do is first just introduce ourselves to everybody here. So I'll introduce myself first and then pass it over to all of you. So as I said, my name is Mary. I moved to Japan about 8 years ago, and I founded a social business in Hiroshima that is in the tourism and peace education industry with some friends, and I did that for 6 years, and then I moved to Tokyo about 2 years ago, and now I work at a government relations consulting firm, so helping mostly non-Japanese companies, but also Japanese companies to connect the Japanese government and to politicians around various issues. So I'm coming mostly from the policy side, also from kind of the social business nonprofit side, and I assist clients in the IT sector, so in a lot of the sectors I just talked about. So that's my story. Very nice to meet you all. And I'm going to maybe pass it over to Seiko to go next.
Okay, I can. Let me take...
Oh, go ahead.
Hello, yeah. Let me take one for the group and go first. So, hi everyone, this is Shirley.
Not Seiko, yeah.
Not Seiko, this is Shirley. And I'm from India, and I just realized that it's the same. We've been here for 8 years. So I've been here for 8 years as well. Most of my career, all of my career has been in Japan. I graduated from India, and that's how I moved to Japan. And currently I manage a team of about 14 engineers. So I'm in tech. I work as an engineering manager. So yeah, very excited to talk to you. I want to hear all of your questions, and especially people who want to get into tech, please hit me up. So thank you.
Hi, Shirley. Hi, guys. So this is Seiko. I am Cameroonian Japanese. Born and raised in Cameroon, moved to Japan. I do quite a couple of things, actually. I am the alien in this group. I have nothing to do with tech, but I'm very interested to learn from these awesome ladies. So what I do is I'm a digital marketing consultant for Maserati, the car, in case you're wondering. But at the same time, I also co-founded a creative agency that introduces African creatives to the Japanese market, and vice versa. So we've held, in partnership with Tokyo Fashion Week, 5 successful shows. And what we do is we're really hoping to promote African creatives to the Japanese market. So that's in summary what I do. Nice to meet you.
Hi. Hi, my name is Urara. I was born here, but I grew up primarily in the US on the East Coast. I don't know if anyone knows where Maryland is. Yay, thank you. Yeah, it's like near DC. And then around 10 years ago, so beat you guys, we came back. In the US, people kept messing up my name, so I used to tell them it's like ooh la la, like the French thing, but replace the L's with R's. So that's my name, Urara. Currently, I run a IoT startup, so Internet of Things. Our main product is a vending machine that you use in the women's bathroom, and it provides menstrual pads. We currently provide them to offices in Japanese companies, so mainly railway companies, real estate companies, and they want to take our service publicly, so in their commercial facilities and train stations and so forth. So that's what we're working on mainly right now, but we've actually had some requests from other, I guess, femtech companies who had D2C services, but they decided maybe, you know, their career path, they want to take it a different way, or they have some life stage changes, they have a child, and they want to sort of maintain the brand but let go of the company. So we've actually been taking over some other people's brands as well. We're about to relaunch some of them during this year and next year. So that's coming up. D2C is a little bit new for me. I don't know if that's tech, but that's something we're doing. Some other things we're doing, but that's about it. Background-wise, I used to actually do research in the field of urban planning, so urban engineering, so like transport planning, things like that. And prior to that, or while I was doing that, I used to run actually 2 nonprofits, both in the area of education.
Okay.
A little bit not related to tech, but I guess founding something. Yeah. That's about me.
Thank you. Awesome. Well, thank you all for your introductions. So I guess to start out, we have a very kind of diverse group of panelists from where we're from to the kind of work we do. So maybe we could start out just hearing a little bit about how each of you got into your respective field. So how did you get to where you are now, and what motivated you to start doing what you're doing in either business or tech?
I landed in my field. I literally landed. So I studied child psychology, that's for starters. And I got into early childhood education, which I absolutely loved but got tired of. And then my first gig as an entrepreneur was I used to like playing Barbie with people on the street. So I'll be dressing and that sounds very disturbing. But I'll be changing, you know, oh, maybe she should have worn a skirt with that or put on the shoes. So I'll be playing that in my head, right? And I researched a little bit and came across the whole idea of personal shopping and personal stylist. And so I sent out an email to a personal stylist, a fashion stylist in Dubai. And within pretty much 30 minutes, she replied and said, oh, I would love to be your mentor. What's your business plan? And I sent her my business plan, and that's how it started. So after that, I got into, my first client, thankfully, was the Jamaican ambassador's wife to Japan, and she introduced me to her network. And through that, I got into diplomatic communications. So I also have experience in diplomatic communications and media. And I think how did I land with Awa'Tori? Pretty much it was, for me, working in media taught me that there is a huge power in the way things are presented and the way stories are told. And unfortunately, Africa is one of the continents that just has never had luck when it comes to storytelling. We're always on the charity side. There's always a child crying with a fly going up its nose, and there's always this huge misrepresentation of what Africa is, and that really fueled my passion in representing it properly. And what was the easiest way? The creative sector. And that's how I got into Awa'Tori. I was introduced to my business partner, Buki, who couldn't make it tonight, and that's how I started. We've been standing for 5 years now. So that's me.
That's amazing. So it sounds like it's kind of a combination of your own initiative, reaching out to the person who became your mentor, and also the luck for you for that all to work out. And then, yeah, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing. Okay, we can move on to Shirley.
Okay, I can go next. So while I was thinking what actually brought me into my career, the first thing I thought about is public speaking. So I was always very interested in public speaking ever since high school. But the job that I actually went on to do, or even the university I went on for, is for introverts. So I went for computer science. I did computer science for 4 years, and then I got my first job, which was more of a back-end full-stack engineer. And that's also very introverted, no public speaking. Nobody cares what you wear. Just do the work and get the job done. But when COVID hit, I think that was a low point for me, because you don't interact with people, especially in my job. And I realized this is really not for me. I love coding, but at the same time, this is not where I really want to be. So I then started exploring options around product management, where I would be a little bit more close to the business side of things. But then when I did that, I realized it's a little bit too close to business and too far away from engineering. People were asking me numbers, finances, just tell me how much money we can make. I'm like, I don't really know. Yeah. So yeah, I thought that was a little bit too far away from coding and from engineering. So then I applied for this new position, and it was for an engineering manager. And actually, I never thought I would land the role, because especially as a manager, nobody hires you when you have no experience, right? So I did have product manager experience, a little bit of people management, but I didn't actually manage people. But my current company, when I was interviewing with them, they actually saw my potential. And towards the last interview, I actually told them, I don't have experience managing people. Are you really okay with that? They're like, yeah, we've seen your potential. We trust you. Just come in.
Wow.
So I am so blessed to be able to go through that process. And currently, I'm managing 14 people. I absolutely love it. It's the highest peak of my career. I do manage men. I manage only men because we have our engineering department, like developers are all men.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been amazing. So yeah, that's my journey.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I think, like, even for me, I feel like either I have this idea that when I get to a certain point in my career, I'll have it all figured out, I'll know what I want to do, but that kind of process of elimination is also a really helpful way to figure out where the goal is. Okay. Go ahead, Urara.
Yeah, so I'll let you know what my original plan was until a few years ago. So since high school, I wanted to go into urban planning. So the original idea was I want to go into real estate developers like Mitsui Fudosan, Mitsubishi, I don't know if you know those, in Japan, or JR East, which is like they do real estate around the stations, or go into MLIT, which is the Ministry of Infrastructure. They do like roads. So all through college, I was like, I'm going to do that, or I'm going to go into government, things like that. Until like 3 years ago, that was still the plan. But the more people I spoke to in the field, they're saying, oh, there's the trend of green cities or smart cities, but we don't understand the tech, and we're just kind of following what the IT companies are telling us, or whatever they've prepared. And it did give me a sense of urgency of like, I think we need to understand both the transport road side, both the land planning side, and the software side. Otherwise, we don't know what we're advising, and we don't know what we're handling. It's just, our jobs are kind of being taken over at that point. So there's like urban planning kind of divisions in these IT companies, and it's like, okay, that means maybe for, me, I want to learn a little bit more about tech while I pursue my sort of dream of being an urban planner. And also, because IT companies, they paid relatively well to college students, I was like, okay, it's a good job and it's a good experience. So my journey with startups started with just part-time jobs, internships at startups when I was in uni. And that's what made it sort of close to my heart of, I really like the culture of startups. And it didn't feel as far for me as I thought it was, because for me it was more, the idea was, it's in Silicon Valley and it's not really something that's like related to me up until that point. But as I worked in different startups, I was like, maybe I do want to do this, but didn't have any specific plans, and also still the original plan of, okay, I'm want to pursue urban planning. Until I started this startup, I was planning to, maybe pursue being a professor in the field. But around that time, just as a side hobby or just as something, as a person, I was struggling with menstruation. I was like, why is it so frustrating? And so I was always just going through these ideas, not thinking I would actually be able to do them, but just as kind of a complainer, or be able to just pitch it to somebody else and maybe they'll do it. But I kind of got extreme with it of like contacting these peak companies. Why don't you have these vending companies, like, why don't you have more of these, etc. Like, why don't you have QR codes? Why do you only have coins? Things like that. And as I was doing it and complaining to my friends, my engineer friends were like, hey, I think I could actually build a prototype for that. And that's what actually built our initial team. We ended up talking to the real estate companies and the railway companies that I was researching with, and they said, well, there was a division that was looking for something like this. And so that's what slowly built the prototype and the first experiment. And it really got to the point of like, okay, we'll all quit our jobs and just do this. And we actually did. It was when we got the team together, and then until after we found it and got funding was like maybe half a year. So this was very quick. So I'm surprised my big corporate, employee friends actually quit and joined, or, co-founded. But that's kind of the sort of energy that we started with. And then we're now 3 years in.
That's amazing. But it sounds like you contemplated so many different angles, from academia to government to startups, and they're all so different, but kind of tackling that same issue. And a big part of it was the people who were around you who were able to help you along the way. And I think Shirley and Seiko were also talking about their mentors or people who believed in them and kind of helped them on their path here. So I'm curious about the role of mentorship as well for women in tech and business. We were talking about this earlier amongst ourselves as well, but have there been women mentors who have really supported you along the way, or do you think about the role of women mentors in your own careers? I mean, maybe I can take. So let's just start as for an example. So I've worked in kind of grassroots activism, and I also now work kind of in the political sphere. And in, I think, for example, my company that I'm working in now, the gender balance is very balanced. And so it's been really, really amazing for me to, especially, in Japanese politics, not a lot of women. It's something that they're working on, but it's been really helpful. And actually, in my current company, has been the first time I've ever really had women mentors in my career. So I think for me, that's been really, really amazing to have. But how about all of you? Yeah. Do you want to go ahead, Urara?
So I think we were sharing backgrounds, and I was sharing that I think in the past, regardless of studies, so industry that I'm currently in, because it's IoT hardware, within tech, it's the least, I think the more male-dominated space, even within tech. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it's the more that I go in through my career, the less women I'm meeting. And I think the only thing that's saving me from that is we're technically in femtech. So if I go to an event related to femtech, it's all women. So that's something that's new to me, actually, that there are so many women in a field that I'm involved in. So that also means that a lot of my mentors have been men. And I think one of the things that I've been fortunate with is that there haven't really been male bosses or mentors that have put me down because I was a woman or just assumed I was going to have a kid. So, blah, blah, blah. But I think, that's one thing that I was fortunate about. But at the same time, I think the female mentors that I did find, they were very supportive, and I found a lot of help from them. But at the same time, I think they became leaders or CEOs at a time where there weren't a lot of women in the field. And so they fought through things that I didn't have to fight through. So their tips don't always work in my current situation, or it's a little bit sort of, I think, you got to do what you got to do in that situation. And I think right now it's something that, doesn't work in my favor. That's one. And I also noticed that there's a huge gap. I don't know if you guys noticed this as well, but there's a lot of female entrepreneurs coming up in their undergrad years, so around before 22, and then after 32 for some reason. And I found that I had a lot of female friends who were founding something, but they actually kind of gradually ended up not pursuing it, because they had these sort of, they had a child, or they decided they wanted to a stable family. That's, doing a startup and being a CEO is kind of, time consuming and demanding. And so I did see why this age range is a little bit lonely. Yeah. And I'm finding that my personal values or my parents don't really pressure me that way as well. So I've been fortunate. But at the same time, it also meant that there weren't a lot of mentors that I could find that has dealt through this and, something with family at the same time. So that's something that I'm kind of actually personally struggling with. A lot of female sort of mentors are, saying maybe you can pursue that after you have a family, or when you get married and you have a stable sort of person out at the same time in your family, in your household. And I'm currently not married. Things like that is something that is on my mind actually lately. So I'd love to know, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I would say mentorship is lacking, very honestly, and just straightforward. Recently, I had the opportunity to do a research project with the Elena Rubinstein organization in France. And what we found out, actually, is that there is a stark difference in what we define as mentors in Japan versus what we define as mentors abroad. So in Japan, like Urara said, is very much, by the way, the name Urara, now that I say it, it's like silk, Urara, because I speak French too. So anyways, like Urara said, I feel that it's very much I don't think it's necessarily people who have the said knowledge in your field, but they're people with experience overall. So I would take my example, for example, with my company, Awa'Tori. Awa'Tori is a creative agency. So to be honest, finding a mentor who has literally built something from scratch is zero in Japan. Especially at my age doing what we do. It's zero. Because to be fair, what we do at Awa'Tori has never existed before in Japan. And so you would think with that business model, in any other country, it's a huge sell, right? It's like, damn, that's new. Okay, we're in, we're investing. In Japan, it's like, that's new. Nope, we're not doing that. It's too different. We've not heard anybody doing that. There's no way we're going to support that. We don't see. There's just so many negatives that come up with that. And so even someone we would consider a mentor, we call her more an advisor. That is Shinoda-san, who used to be the head of Rakuten Fashion Week, and now she's the head of Itochu Textiles in Africa, and I think it's Asia Pacific. But even then, like Urara said, it's more of experience versus I did something similar to you guys, so I can walk you through from seed stage all the way to upscale. A lot of times you would see someone, a mentor who is like seed stage, who'd be like, okay, I can advise you with how to set up a company, which lawyers to go to, who to talk to. In our case, in the creative industry, you have to know certain people, right? If you don't have names of people in your portfolio, people are like, sorry, we're not interested, right? And then you also have the mentors who are at the upscale level, who are more of, okay, we can kind of help you with this, but the rest is ganbatte kudasai, you know? And so we've seen a lot of that. And if you ask me if there's like mentorship per se, I would say not really. It's more of like, as we say back home in Cameroon, all man for your own. It's like you do it by yourself. I'll struggle, you struggle, you know? And you figure it out as you go. You know, exactly. It's like we can connect you, but we cannot hold your hand through the whole process. So, yeah.
I see. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess when I was thinking about the answer, I do want to have a little bit of twist to this answer and probably not answer your question directly. Sorry about that. But when I think about like equality or even feminism, for me it's like men have such an important role to play in that. And I think my career has also been an example of that. Like Urara said, a lot of my mentors have been men. And I've been so blessed to have really good men who have mentored me throughout my career. And I've been able to learn not just about coding, but even about finance, about business, and really having somebody to go to. It's not just somebody who is higher up, but when I talk about my own like manager team, there's always people I can like message and be like, okay, I'm really struggling here. Can you help me out? And yeah, the empathy and patience that I've got from them has been outstanding. So I guess I also want to tell the women in here that, yeah, don't feel like because that person is a man that they won't, you know, they'll always want to hit on you or they'll do something bad. Most men are good and they want to help you. So I guess even if you're going into a new space where you're the only woman, I don't think you need to be scared, especially in Japan. Most people want you there. A lot of companies want women. So yeah, male mentors are also important. So I guess, yeah, that's a twist from me.
No, a very good twist. Yeah, so going from that, I think we were also talking a little bit before our session began today about how with the general population decline here in Japan, the government and companies are looking to hire, you know, a diverse set of workers, skilled workers from around the world, and we were talking a little bit about how for those of us who own companies, it can be also difficult to find talent. So I wonder too, going to kind of, and I want to come back to also like what challenges do women specifically face in the workforce, but also thinking about kind of what can we do, we were talking about before, from the grassroots to really help that movement of people from different perspectives, more women entering these spaces. Like we were saying, right? There's just maybe a lack of people who are doing what you're doing, and maybe you'll become a mentor to someone in the future. So maybe the three of you and all of us have a big role as people who are working in business and tech. So I guess that would, one question would be, what are the actual struggles that you've been facing, if there are struggles that are specifically kind of, as a woman, this is an issue. Doesn't have to be just one, but and then kind of what can we do to, you know, as intrapreneurs or entrepreneurs in our own companies to make the places we work more welcoming and places that are welcoming of more women in the workforce.
I'll go. I'll go first.
Go ahead.
I'll go first on this one. So I was just telling Urara and Shirley, sorry, I almost said Sylvia, sorry. I was just telling Shirley and Urara that it's funny because we need to contextualize things, right? Japan compared to other developed countries, or even some developing countries, because I'm thinking India in my mind, has lagged in terms of creating a startup ecosystem that fosters entrepreneurial initiatives, right? And what they've done over the past few years is that they've gone almost into overdrive. And by overdrive, I mean funding, specific startups and support and like starting startups, but with a massive focus on tech. And tech is already overly saturated, let's face it. Wherever you go, it's tech, right? Even, I was just telling you guys, when Juanes reached out to me and was like, hey, we're having this discussion, I was like, Juanes, I don't do tech. Please don't ask me, I don't do tech. And it's like, no, it's not only tech we're talking about. But if you think about it, that automatically forces people, not only, I would say women, it's both men and women, but it automatically forces people into a specific niche. You either fit the mold or you don't fit the mold. The mold being tech, right? So women in tech, for example, would already have the issue of facing a predominantly male industry, right? When they're going into tech. And then we talk about the people who don't fit, like me, who are in, you're in a creative industry or finance industry, hospitality. We just don't fit. So there's absolutely no support to be given. And then you come down to the socioeconomic aspect of Japan as a society. The truth is, from the research that we had, 5.5%, women in general have 5.5 times domestic overload than men do. So just as Urara said, by the time you're trying to figure out, ooh, I have this idea, bam, get married, right? And then by the time you're like, oh, maybe I can, bam, kid. Right? Or maybe, maybe I should just talk with this, bam, mom is sick. So you have one thing happening after the other. So women in general just don't have that quote unquote liberty to think like creatively, like, oh, let me start this. I'm not going to go into men because I see men here. I don't want to hide, you know what I'm saying? But anyways, that's one thing. And then you can ask, do people fund? Yes, there's funding. There is funding, but unfortunately, a huge amount of the funding goes to the seed stage or the scale-up stage. And there's a massive gap in between. And the in-between is where we need help. And unfortunately, we found out that 85% of women-led startups fail at this point because of zero support. We're talking financial, we're talking mentorship. And not to talk about, back again, the socioeconomic level of Japan is like, unfortunately, Japan has a lot of growth to do in terms of seeing women as equals. That has unfortunately not changed. Yes, there are women in politics, there are a few faces that we know, names that we know, we throw around, but does that really change things fundamentally, right? I think the issue is that we are so prone to looking at things on a surface level and superficial level that we forget that it has to be addressed from the roots. And unless we, in general, entrepreneurs, whichever one it is, figure out a way to understand that things start from below, not from the surface, there's never going to be a change. We're just going to be going in loops, right? So what can we do to change this? Big question. I would instead throw that to the crowd and ask, what do you think we can do as entrepreneurs? Because we also are fighting our own demons, right? And devils when it comes to funding and, mentorship and all that. I think it's like a team effort. I usually say, I'm going to talk from my agency, right? We started an e-commerce website that promotes African designers. And when I say African designers, I think what comes to mind is the very vivid, crazy prints, Funny fact, that is not made in Africa. That is made in Holland. And we tend to spend so much money buying from people who have stolen our patterns and reselling it at higher prices to us. There's an issue there. And so that's also part of the education that we're trying to do as an e-commerce website. But a lot of people, the feedback we got, mind you, let me fix some voices here. We got some feedback from people saying, really? Why is it this expensive? It's made in Africa, right? Excuse me? But that tells you the misconception that exists. Made in Africa is bad quality. I remember we had an interview once with NHK, and the interviewer asked me, oh, so why do you guys, why do you want to sell these pieces? What do you think would change? And I said, let me just ask you a question, because mind you, I was a teacher before, so I throw my side balls like that, and I said, okay, look at your bag. If I put two bags in front of you, there's one made in Ghana, there's one made in Italy, which one would you choose? And he said, Italia da ne. And I said, why Italia? And he said, well, Italia brando da kara sa. And it's like well made and they're known for craftsmanship. And I was like, exactly that, marketing. Because the truth is, made in Italy does not mean quality. It has been known as quality belts, leather goods, bags, whatever, but that does not negate that there's quality elsewhere. Why do we feel that anything from Africa is not quality? Marketing. And also just misconception of what comes out from the Black continent, right? So this may get political real quick, so I'm gonna end here. But it's just about supporting, re-educating yourself, right? And I think like feedback that we get, for example, for the e-commerce website, it's just, no, feel for yourself, see for yourself. Don't go with what you think you know. Re-educate yourself. Be open to supporting other businesses. For example, if I know someone is starting something, I want to be there to support them. That's how it starts, because it shows that I see potential in what you're doing. I'm not saying support just anything, Obviously, if you have a passion for it, if you feel there's passion for it, if you feel there's potential, if you feel there's a need for it, like Urara's whole idea of pads in bathrooms, like who would have thought, right? Support that. Her friends actually, okay, quitting, wow, that was a leap of faith, because honey, ooh, especially when you need a job, right? Yeah. But still, it's about believing in the support of supporting other people's dreams. And I think that's where we need to do more teamwork, right? But anyways, that would be one thing. It's just supporting each other.
Can I ask a question?
Oh. Yeah, go ahead.
I will answer the question, but I was wondering, the brand Cloudy? So I was wondering what you think about that, because I think their whole thing is like trying to rebrand, but still use their, I was just wondering how you view that brand.
Lila is trying to get me in trouble out here, you know what I'm saying? But no, this is a good question, because I've had this question before by a very close friend. Listen, I support all brands, because the baseline is Cloudy is trying to rebrand Africa. I'm all about rebranding Africa, right? They are trying to make people know that we make good bags, we make good, I think they do also clothes, yeah? But I would also want, you know what's funny? I actually know the owners of Cloudy, so I'm gonna just be shading my face. But anyways, they know this already, right? But I would also want for us to, even if we sell these things, to educate people about where it comes from. Because the truth is, Vlisco, for example, is the brand that makes these textiles and fabrics. It's based in Holland, and the patterns are beautiful. I know lots of people who walk up to me and like, oh my God, you guys' patterns are beautiful. I'm like, it has nothing to do, but sure. I don't mind that, but what I would like is, even if we do sell those, we educate people about what where they come from and why we use them. I don't know if you guys want to hear the story, but if you do, please find me after. It's a long story. But anyways, I don't know if you answered your question.
Yeah, I wanted to. Oh, thank you. Yeah, sorry, I'm pushing it all back to you. Yeah, I was wondering. Yeah, but I guess their role is sort of the changing the image part, I guess. And yeah, I have to answer your question. So
You don't have to.
struggles. We're trying to stay on. Yeah, I'm trying to like shift my side to her story and like it's okay. I have to be a part of the panel as well. I think. Struggles as a woman, for example, you mentioned like, pregnancies, things that, only women currently, experience. Things related to menstruation is something that I see in my field, obviously. But something related to that, I think, as I think tech startup pitching to VCs. So we've been funded by VCs twice, so 2 rounds. Something that I felt was anything that was women issue related was kind of doubted or was said to be, I'm not a woman, I've never experienced it, so I don't know if it exists kind of thing. And it's like we would provide as much data as we can. We've done, thousands of interviews, things like that. And it's like you would never be like, well, I don't own a pet, so I don't think I can invest in a pet company, for example. Like that would never happen. And so we would try to use these metaphors of like, I don't think you would say that about this, but you say that about this, and we have so much evidence. Like what else do you need for it to? And then as soon as they ask their wives, they'll be like, oh, I'm convinced. My wife said this. Yeah. That's something that we went through over and over again, more than 50 times in at least one round. So that's something that I see as kind of an issue of, that is a bias that we see, I guess. And I think something that I see is an issue in women's entrepreneurship in general, assuming that a lot of women, female-founded startups in Japan are primarily femtech startups, and they're not necessarily tech startups. I want to emphasize it's not a bad thing for it to not be tech, but it sometimes is a consumer good. It might be a menstrual cup. It might be a food product, something like that. But it tends to be those things that come from their personal needs or personal issues that they kind of went through. And one of the things that I think is a little unfortunate is Seiko mentioned, there's kind of this weird boost of maybe too much boost of IT startups and things like that. So VCs are pushing for, we all need to be SaaS companies, so software as a startup companies. So they're all kind of trying to get these women to be like, you're selling cups now, but you're gonna make it into SaaS in some way. And then they get VC funding, so that means they get pressured to do sort of an exit of some sort within a few years. And then they have to change their whole vision and what they're doing. And I see people going through all these struggles and also having to shift their way into something that they didn't really intend on starting, and also something they're not experienced in. And then something that sometimes goes against their original vision. And then they're seen as incompetent after, or seen as, oh, you've took investment, but you're not going through with it. And I think it's just unfortunate because you don't have to be a startup or VC-backed startup to be doing something great or to be a CEO. But I think that's something that was pushed on women as at the same time as the trend of let's encourage women's empowerment in general, but also women's place in startups. And the fact that that came at the same time was a little unfortunate, I feel like. I don't know how you guys feel about that. But yeah, that's something that I see, I think. So yeah, we were just talking about hiring. So I definitely struggle to hire women and female engineers. So our engineering team still continues to be mainly male, unfortunately. As in, not unfortunate that it's mostly male, but we are literally like trying to promote women's health and stuff like that. We're actively looking, but it's just so hard to find people. And especially because we also do IoT / we're involved in hardware. We prefer to have somebody that's had experience with hardware, which is like mostly men over their 40s, So it's not even, there's not even a lot of young men that do it either. So that's something that we've struggled with. And one of the reasons why I keep my positions in my previous nonprofits in education is because we see a lot of points in a woman's sort of journey in tech during their student years, how that affects whether they actually end up pursuing a tech career. So for example, my master's I did at UTokyo engineering, where we have these like alumni mentoring sessions, and it's kind of surprising. So I didn't experience this, but it's surprising how many girls mentioned they started in a STEM field lab, but they actually were not included or purposely excluded from the sort of alpha kind of leader type student, male student, and they were sort of bullied for it, or they were sort of a romantic interest of somebody, and then something happened, drama, and then the professor ended up blaming it sort of on the girl of kind of starting the drama, and then they end up feeling like, okay, I tried to be, the only woman in the field. I was told I could do it, but it's just too hard. And I've heard a little bit more than I thought I would, and I don't know how I could kind of approach that, what my solution would be really, but that's where I see a lot of women wanting to pursue STEM, and then I think social media is like, you can do it, and then we kind of see these barriers in the real world, and it's fortunate that I guess we haven't bumped into male colleagues or students like that, but I think that's something real that does actually happen.
Yeah.
That I don't know what to do with right now, but I am trying to stay involved in education.
Yeah. And so I think before as well, Seiko was kind of putting the question to the group of like, what can we do? I think all of us here are, have our own personal connections, are in our own situations, and I think this is kind of good timing to switch our focus to all of you here, if in case you have any comments on maybe what Urara just said or anything that's happened. Any comments about your own work or your own experience, or if you want to ask any questions to our panelists, I think we can go ahead and start our Q&A. So don't be shy. If you have any questions or, again, any personal experience or comments to share, just raise your hand. Yes, exactly. Or just like, okay, maybe we can go here and then here. Yeah. Oh.
I can project. Are you thinking of expanding the vending machine possibilities to other fields? Like, for example, my friend's an artist, and she had an idea, instead of standing at a booth to sell her postcards and stuff, there could be like a vending machine, and people could just buy her art in that way, or T-shirts.
Yeah. So one of the most requested ones are usually, because our clients are facilities, usually they tend to be like diapers. So because diapers are pretty big, and parents have to carry them around. So like having those there. Diapers for the elderly, I guess, because we're an aging population, there are people, leaking and stuff like that. So actually that's mostly for the men's bathrooms. But actually these fluffy things are actually the hardest things to make vending machines for, whereas things like paper or things like boxes, product that you can push out, it's a hard physical object, is actually easier to do. So that's something that actually, if we wanted to do, it is easier to do with use existing vending machine designs. So question being yes, I think so. I think the biggest hurdle with physical robotic things or vending machine things is the initial cost of starting is so high that you have to either buy a bunch of these, like import them, or you build them from scratch. That's like, in Japanese yen, that would be like tens of millions just to start, even your first 100 dispensers, for example, or your first vending machines. And then when you place them outside, you have to either pay money or figure out a way for them to feel like it's worth putting it there. It is, I think, a little bit harder to start as a startup, but I definitely think if it's postcards, it is a little bit easier, I would say. Something I feel is difficult to do this business in Japan is we think of Japan as this like high tech, and we do a lot of like robots and things like that. Most of the manufacturing and designing is being outsourced to China, so much so that if you want to do anything that involves software, you will not be able to do it completely here most of the time, or spend a lot of money. Like you have to hire somebody from one of the Hitachi, Fujitsu, like those companies, which is a lot of money. So that's something that I am a little bit worried about in terms of our domestic market and sort of situation. But even if you have a company here that does anything related, you will always have some advisor, some employees, staff that's in China. Not that it's wrong or bad that they're Chinese, that's not what I'm saying, but usually they have different systems that they use in China, so you have to remake the software, like rebuild it a little bit. It is a little bit more complicated, but I think there's a lot of potential. So now that we have the I guess, the know-how, the skills to actually do that. We'd love to expand in other places. And we've gotten a lot of requests from cities outside of Japan as well. So that's something exciting. And, take the vending machine culture of Japan abroad. That might be fun. So yeah, open to any ideas. Thanks for your question.
So you said I could share experiences. So I'm from Jamaica, and Jamaica is actually known for having a lot of female leaders in business and politics. We had a female prime minister. So since the start of my career, so I studied IT, but I went into marketing, media. Right now I'm in early childhood, and I've always had the experience of working with female leaders, even here in Japan, because it's early childhood, so yeah. And in Jamaica, in the marketing field, media, and here, all of my older female leaders, the successful ones, they're all divorced. They all
That's not the direction.
and you can tell it's obvious it's because of their job. And I was wondering, how do people feel about that? Like what can we do to change that narrative? 'Cause it's a lot more prevalent than you think. Yeah. I mean, yeah, we can do it, girls, we can do it, but at what cost?
I don't know if you guys.
Yeah, I was just wondering if, and anybody actually, what you think.
I want to ask because I think there's actually I think it's on. Yeah. I think there's something that people have told me, which is, or I actually have heard, it's like, oh, why would you start a startup in your 20s when it's like your prime, dating, konkatsu, marriage mate finding years? It's like, you're going to seem so intimidating, like, blah, blah, blah. That's something that I've actually heard. So I was wondering how, I don't know if it's like very Japanese as well. I'm very fortunate to have a partner. I'm not married, but a partner that's like, well, you do you, like, well, but I feel like that's something that does turn off a lot of women in their early 20s to continue or start initiatives, or to go into like hardcore areas that like makes you seem like aggressive or something. Like I've heard that. So I'm wondering. I'd love to.
Personally, I've gotten that a lot. People told me that I'm very intimidating. I mean, Ignore these three people in the front, please. Just ignore them. No, but the truth is, you raise a very pertinent point, Racine. The truth is, unfortunately, a lot of times, unfortunately, you have to compromise at some point. It's either or, right? And I think Urara it's really a blessing to find someone who can support you through what you want to do, right? It's really about finding the right person who can see you not as a threat, but as a team member. Because the more we view each other as competitors, the less we're able to actually build something, right? And that's why marriages unfortunately also fail, because it's just like, but this is my dream, but I'm here, but this is what I want to do, but I'm also here. It's like this argument of, but I'm here, you're doing your thing, I'm doing my thing, but I want you to be here with me, And I think it's really about being, I don't want to use the word intuition because it's not necessarily that, but it's really being able to choose someone. It has to become a conversation at some point where you say, this is my dream, this is what I want to achieve. Is this something you see supporting, right? I'm not someone who usually gives up my dream for someone else.
As we shouldn't.
I'm rarely ever the person, right? I mean, like, I think that's unfortunate because I'm not a certified counselor or anything, but one thing I do know from experience and also just from studies is that, unfortunately, a lot of people enter relationships thinking, what can you give me versus what can I give you? And when that mentality enters a relationship, by the time the person stops giving you what you were expecting, there is a depreciation in affection, right? And so there's a need, you have to be here, you're working too much, I never see you, you're always on the road, you're always doing this. And it's just like, honey bun, this is 50-50, you know what I'm saying? There are some seasons where one thing would be a priority and the other would not be. That's constantly changing. Life is constantly changing. So you need to find someone who's able to get on that wavelength with you, and that's rare, right? Because everybody wants their own dream, unfortunately. So it's really about, I think sometimes, it's not a date number one kind of conversation like, are you gonna be on board with me? You know, you're gonna scare off the poor guy or the poor woman, right? But unfortunately, I feel these are things that need to be discussed at some point. It's like, this is my dream, this is what I want to do. But unfortunately, it's really way too often that we see women following their dreams by themselves, and men. It's not only women, to be fair, men as well, right?
And also, I think just in terms of like government policy too, the split of like household tasks and like maternity leave, paternity leave. The Japanese government is also trying to push maternity leave a lot more now, so that the split can be more even. And so, thankfully, I mean, it is kind of a hopeful sign that more and more fathers in Japan are now also taking their. I think it was something like 30. We got up to 30% or something. So that's also, speaking of work-life balance, speaking of a partner who you can be a team with. I think for men in Japan and outside of Japan, it can also be quite a burden to have to work this expectation to work really long hours, to not get as much paternity leave and things like that. But do we have any other questions? And thank you for sharing your own experience as well. Any other questions? Yeah.
Thank you. So it's just around, we're circling back to the conversation we're having around like women, right? And women in workplaces, and especially with each of you being in such different workspaces, right? I wanted to check, how far out are we actually going to bring the women in to have them like do the jobs, right? So for example, if someone doesn't believe in themselves and doesn't believe in their potential to be able to apply for that job, there's no way in hell that they're going to apply for that job, right? But how are you guys as entrepreneurs and leaders within certain fields actually going out to find women, you know? Like, are you partnering with schools? Are you partnering with organizations that are focused on women and empowering women, right? I know like now we're in that stage where it's like, yeah, men need to be empowered also, and that's a story for another day. It's not what I'm trying to do today, but how are we, actively going up to show women like, look, this is me, I've been able to achieve A, B, C, D, you can be able to achieve these same things, but you need to believe in yourself, right? Like, how are you showing up for the mentors that you didn't have in your lives in other women, right? Like, so that's just something I wanted to check. And how are you also holding your organizations responsible? So for example, in recruitment, right? Like, are you actively making sure that they're going to recruit from, I don't know, but I'm African, right? So I'm half Kenyan, half Ugandan, and we have schools that actually focus on tech, right? And tech schools in certain organizations. And what I did, like when I used to work in Africa, and in Rwanda specifically, is we used to partner with schools to make sure that we are getting the female talent in, right? And during those conversations, when you're having those conversations, you go and you have open days or something like that, and you actually like talk to them, right? But it's all about like investment, right? So like, how much investment are you actually making, right? Because it's very easy to say, yeah, women don't apply, I only see 2 women, but okay. Like, no offense to you, Shirley. no offense to you. But just like, no offense.
So I'm probably not interviewing people in the hundreds just because we're around a 10 people team right now, and we're not really in the need for too many people, but for future hires and for, for our future team, we are reaching out. One of the things that I personally try to do is try to go to events that are mostly, women. I think women have their own networks as well. That's one that I think I've been a little bit shy of going to events, so that's something that I've been trying to do since I founded. Something else that I do is actually outside of my current startup, but actually with the nonprofit that I founded, I think a few years ago. So we do educational programs. That's not really specifically about women, but we actually helped are still helping to this day, a program that Nikkei, the newspaper company, so they actually started with us a competition for female students in Kosen, which is like a Japanese high school and early 2 years of college put together kind of place. So it's technical vocational schools around that age group. Each school around the country, they have students pitch their research, pitch their business ideas that they came from their research, and it's all over the country. So I try to go and join the program actually actively, but also talk to the people who are actually in our organization who actually run the program. So these are high school / undergrad students who we wouldn't be hiring for a few years, but we try to let them know, hey, I have a network of startups that welcome women. I also know companies that are friendly with women. We also started a session where we have big companies where they have women in their STEM divisions. So we do a panel. We're actually doing that next month as well, so that they have actual women in these teams doing something. So it doesn't have to be join us specifically, but we are trying to create spaces where we have mentors or role models in these companies, and not just looking for jobs hoping there's a woman there. And so that's my indirect way, I guess, if that makes sense. And then just finally is just telling professors like, hey, we'll probably be hiring. We're really looking for people in hardware. We're really, and it's just so little people that I'm just trying to tell everybody, hey, we're trying to hire. So that's my microwave, just telling everybody, all my friends. So actually our first full-time employee was a high school student who was in my grade. I don't want to say student because that sounds so distant, but I did not speak to her. She has not spoken to me when we were in the same grade, when we were in the same high school. We were never in the same class. So she reached out through a common friend who was also in our high school, and she was like, hey, so I was telling her, I'm really looking for people like this. So she's not in tech, but she apparently saw, the stories that she reposted, and she was like, hey, through that friend, I'm considering your startup. She actually ended up joining full time. She's been involved for a year and a half. It's amazing because the other companies she was considering were the big four or things like that. So it's just amazing, but just word of mouth goes so far. So that's just something that I've really felt in the last year. So that's something that I've been trying to do as well. Yeah.
So for me, two things that I do. I share my story. So I think the hardest thing usually for a girl is you are sometimes easily intimidated, right, when you're talking to men or other women. And I've given talks where girls would kind of shyly walk up to me and be like, can we talk? I'm like, of course, I think it's important to look relatable, right? Because nobody really can learn from someone who is too high up there. Because it's almost like I'm too far down to even get to your point. So I don't think we have a conversation starter. So it's important to share your story. I love telling the story of how I got into what I do because I was singing ABCs. I was changing poopy diapers, and it's funny because you can never imagine. I used to be a teacher by day, and I would go ride my bike in Akasaka area and put in the flyers of my company. And it's crazy because in one lunch date, everything changed for me. You never know, right? But you also need to share those stories because there's someone who's seated there who's thinking, I have this idea, but I don't even know how to start. You can start somewhere. I also always say, don't wait for everything to be perfect before starting. You are never 100% fully ready for anything. Anything. Never. Don't even think it. Just jump. Well, don't just jump. Maybe take a short leap or a skip. The other thing I do is, other than telling my story, is I make sure that I introduce people to my network. So I've been really blessed. I've lived in Japan for 18 years, so the majority of my career has been in Japan. But I've been blessed to work with foreign companies, foreign entities, organizations, diplomatic, publication, media, now fashion, now luxury cars, which I was never into, by the way. That should tell you, if you want to work for a luxury car, go and apply for a luxury car company, you know? I never was in, I think the only car I knew at some point was a Peugeot and Renault and, you know, the Land Rovers and all that. That's the, if you ask me horsepower, I'm like, what is horsepower? You know? At least now I can kind of hold a conversation. But anyways, that's to say, I have a huge network, right? And even going to like government level network. And so I always try when I meet girlfriends, I'm like, okay, what are you looking for? Are you interested in finding this job? And I would introduce. There's nothing wrong in that, right? And I feel sometimes when you have network, people hold back. They're like, this is my connection. Okay, I know, right? I think people are guilty here. But it's true, right? Sometimes you feel like you want to hold on to that connection, but that connection could actually help someone, right? And I feel like it's important, even if it's like, oh, I'm looking, like Urara said, for a fact, I don't have problem hiring. Creative agencies, people run to you. They're like, we want to do something creative. The IT, I didn't know that you guys have issues. I'll be pushing people your way, don't worry. But the thing is, if you know people who are trying to hire, and you know someone who's looking for a job, how hard is it to just be like, hey, connection? Like, that's what we do back home, right? That's how, well, when I say back home, that's Cameroon. But anyways, so back home in Cameroon, if you're looking for a job, it's like, hey, I have an auntie who is, you know, hiring in her, you know? I have an uncle who has a, you know, and you just introduce. It's really easy because you don't know how you could be helping that person. So those are the two things I do. And we do have collaborations with schools, Kansai Gaidai being one of them, and another school in Singapore, wherein we always have interns coming for the company. Thankfully, they're always girls. I mean, that's something that we don't struggle with in the creative agencies. It's almost always girls, right? And a few men. So yeah, I guess in that sense, that's what we do as Awa'Tori, what I do. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
I was wondering if it's a good time to plug InnoHive. Like, if you're looking for a job, yeah. You have them.
Exactly, yeah. Please talk to us.
And I think that is a perfect segue into the networking part of our evening. We're all here together. We can all come together, connect each other. We all have such great networks, connect on LinkedIn, business cards. So I think we have some food and refreshments in the back. And with that, maybe we can end the formal part of our panel and all go greet each other, get to know each other. And thank you all so much for coming. A big round of applause for our panelists. Thank you all so much. All right, let's get up and go eat and chat.